Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are unpacking a story that honestly feels like it was pulled straight out of a Hollywood script. We're doing a deep dive into Elon Musk's completely wild journey, going from the brink of total bankruptcy to literally becoming the world's first trillionaire. We're going to map out exactly how a string of explosive, multi-million-dollar failures somehow transformed into a mega corporation that just pulled off a historic IPO. It is a fascinating look at risk, extreme resilience, and basically the future of business. So let's just dive right in. To really appreciate the absolute heights of this success, we actually have to start at absolute rock bottom. The year is 2008, September to be exact. Musk is 37 years old, recently divorced, and his financial situation is, well, practically at zero. Things are so incredibly bad that he's literally living on borrowed rent money from friends. Tesla is on the verge of total collapse right in the middle of a massive global financial crisis. And his rocket company? It's hanging by a single fraying thread. I mean, literally liquidators are standing by, running the math on how to sell off the company's scrap metal to pay back creditors if the day goes sideways. And when you look at the timeline of those early attempts, you completely understand why the liquidators were waiting in the wings. The very first rocket attempt back in 2006, it caught fire in just 25 seconds. A year later, attempt number 2 completely fails to reach orbit. But August 2008, that was the most devastating one. The third rocket totally burned up on launch. And here's a pretty wild detail from our source material. That third rocket was actually carrying the ashes of James Doohan, the famous actor from Star Trek. His family paid for his ashes to go to space as his dying wish, and they were completely destroyed in the explosion. So now, the company is entirely out of cash, and Musk is down to his absolute last chance. Now, to understand how Musk even got himself into this crazy rocket business in the first place, we actually have to flash back a bit to 2001. He had this wild philanthropic idea to send a tiny greenhouse containing live mice to Mars. The goal was just to drum up public interest and essentially force NASA to fund a real Mars mission. But to do this, he needed a cheap rocket. So he takes 3 separate trips to Russia, trying to buy decommissioned intercontinental ballistic missiles, minus the nuclear warheads, obviously. But the Russian generals, they treated him like a complete joke. They demanded cash for every single meeting, used that money to buy vodka, drank heavily during the negotiations, and just kept jacking up the prices on him. According to our source, one general actually spat on him. So you can imagine he's incredibly frustrated. He boards a flight home completely empty-handed. But it was actually on that flight that a massive realization hit him. He developed this mental framework that he playfully called the Idiot Index. Basically, this is a model that compares the final retail price of a finished product against the bare-bones cost of its raw materials. Musk decided to apply this exact index to rockets, essentially asking himself, okay, what is a rocket actually made of? Well, it's aluminum, titanium, copper, carbon fiber. To really grasp how this builds into a massive business strategy, our source uses a brilliant analogy. Just imagine a t-shirt. If the raw thread and the buttons only cost 10 taka, but the retail price you see in the store is 100 taka, you are paying a huge premium, right? The so-called idiots pay the 100, while the smart people just buy the materials for 10 and put it together themselves. Well, when Musk applied this exact same math to the aerospace industry, he made a totally shocking discovery. The raw materials to build a rocket only accounted for 2% of the traditional retail price of a launch. 2%. The markups were just astronomical. And that was the exact moment he decided, you know what? I'm not going to buy a rocket. I'm going to build one myself for a fraction of the cost. Which snaps us right back to that do-or-die moment in September 2008. It's the 4th launch, the absolute final attempt. The rocket lifts off, and against all odds, it reaches orbit in exactly 9 minutes and 31 seconds. It officially became the first privately funded liquid propellant rocket to reach orbit in human history. When reporters asked him for his reaction, a super emotional Musk just said, "I don't even know what to say. This is fucking mind-blowing." And just like that, the scrap metal liquidators packed up their bags and went home. But the truly crucial turning point is what happened next. Just a few short months after that successful launch, Musk gets a phone call that literally changes history. NASA had watched the success of that 4th launch, and they offered his company a $1.6 billion contract for 12 resupply flights to the space station. I mean, talk about a save. That massive influx of capital instantly saved the company from ruin, brought all the investors flocking back, and totally set the stage for everything we're seeing today. All right, so let's move into the next phase, the trillion-dollar engine, decoding the 4 revenue streams. So how exactly did a company that almost went completely bankrupt selling rockets evolve into this multi-stream holding corporation that, according to our source, recently launched a historic IPO and made its founder a trillionaire? Well, when you break down their current revenue streams, you see a completely new reality. Rocket launches, they're actually a minority of the income now. The massive slice taking up 60% of the company's revenue is Starlink. By aggressively launching their own satellites, they now control a staggering 75% of all active satellites in the entire sky. Government contracts and their holding of the social media giant X.com make up another 30%, and then artificial intelligence and other tech fill out the rest. But what is truly staggering about that Starlink telecom network is this specific number right here: 40%. That is Starlink's profit margin. For a telecom network, that is completely unheard of. But because they use their own rockets to launch the satellites, their overhead is ridiculously low. They completely bypass traditional earthly infrastructure. There's no digging trenches, no laying fiber optic cables, no physical cell towers to constantly maintain. And that crazy efficiency allows them to serve an estimated 15 million global subscribers with margins that even tech giants like Apple and Microsoft struggle to hit. When you look at how this builds into a larger corporate ecosystem, our source breaks it down into 4 distinct pillars. First, you have Starlink providing global internet. Then you've got government contracts, where NASA and the Pentagon rely heavily on the Falcon 9 rocket, which, by the way, boasts a 100% reliability rate for payload delivery. But then it gets really interesting. The source material notes the company also acts as a holding group for X.com, capturing all its revenues. And finally, that 4th pillar contains massive future tech investments. This includes XAI and, as the source points out, a massive $60 billion acquisition of a coding company called Cursor. Now, the absolutely crucial point here is how all these seemingly distinct businesses feed into one another to create what the source calls the ultimate synergy. These aren't just random investments. Think about it. AI companies require massive data centers. So instead of building them here on Earth, the plan is to use their own rockets to build power-efficient data centers up in space, where they can harvest unimpeded solar power. They are even planning to use those same rockets to mine precious metals like gold and silver directly from asteroids. It's like a giant puzzle where the logistical loop is entirely self-contained. And here is a highly specific, kind of surprising financial quirk from our source material. Usually when a mega company generates massive amounts of excess cash, they park it in real estate or traditional bonds, right? Well, according to the source, this company took a totally different route. Their balance sheet holds exactly 18,712 Bitcoin. They actively chose to park their corporate wealth in cryptocurrency, which means the company's valuation is also tethered directly to the explosive potential of crypto markets. All of this incredible profitability across these different sectors perfectly set the stage for what the source describes as a wildly overbooked IPO. Because the company went public during this peak profitability, it resulted in a massive explosion of wealth. And honestly, the best part? It rewarded the extremely loyal employees who had stuck around for over 2 decades. The source actually notes that even the baristas making coffee in the office cafe, who had been given company stock options years ago, were instantly transformed into millionaires overnight. Now let's look at the future with Starship, the ultimate master plan for humanity. So Starship is the largest, most powerful rocket ever built by human hands. It's capable of carrying a massive 150,000 kilograms of payload, and it's designed to fulfill that original 2001 vision of colonizing Mars, or even providing ultra-cheap point-to-point cargo transport right here on Earth. Looking at this crazy future alongside the past, we can really synthesize this entire journey into 3 core lessons. First, extreme lows often precede extreme highs. I mean, a company days away from liquidation is now valued beyond the GDP of some actual nations. Second, experts are often trapped in fixed thinking. The Russian generals, the traditional aerospace engineers, they all told Musk it was impossible, and he proved them wrong using first principles. And third, the mega corporations of the next century will not operate linearly. They won't just make one product. They will be non-linear webs, huge interconnected ecosystems of space, AI, telecommunications, and finance. Which leaves us with a final thought to consider. We have just seen how a single company can weave rockets, satellite internet, artificial intelligence, and social media into one unified trillion-dollar structure. So I want you to ask yourself, as these non-linear, AI-driven space conglomerates continue to grow and synergize over the next century, how will they ultimately change your daily life? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this breakdown was as fascinating for you to learn as it was for me to share. Keep asking those big questions, and I will see you next time.